State Senator Scott Jensen is on the line with us. Appreciate you joining the program.
Thank you, Walter. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Jensen, thanks for coming on. This is Chris. So I mentioned a couple bills, and maybe we could just get into one of the topics here with me and Zavier. Take your pick if you want to talk about your marijuana bill first or your ballot access reform bill first, and we'll turn it over to you.
Well, I'd actually like to start with the ballot access bill. Minnesota has always been a leader, but it seems like we've really taken a hit in terms of our courage. And to me, when you look at what we are seeing in North and South Dakota and Iowa and Wisconsin in terms of what does it take to get someone other than a Democrat or Republican on the ballot so that the voters can consider that candidate, we made it very difficult. So when you, Chris, wrote the commentary about 6 months ago, I remember reading it and thinking, this guy's he's spot on. And so I asked my legislative assistant, get me in touch with this guy. I've got to meet with him. And so from that, I think we forged, Chris, literally one of these ideal relationships where, it came from grassroots. It came from you. It came from a lot of the people that you work with. It came from people like Zavier. It came from the Green Party, the Cannabis Party. And you folks just kept pushing it to the front of our consciousness. And I just happened to be there saying, I agree with you. I think that we do need to allow Minnesota to have a broader access of choice than just the two major parties.
And to catch people up to speed, we did have a press conference on this on Thursday, and the chairs of all alternative parties were there. Like Dr. Jensen mentioned, the Green Party, the Independence Party, the marijuana parties were there. And thank you for what you said. The crux of the situation here is it takes 5 to 10 times the amount of effort to get anyone on the ballot outside of the two-party system than it does in any surrounding state. So he drafted an 8-point proposal to bring it in line with other states. We're not asking for any kind of special treatment, but the percentage is 1% or 2% in every state around us. Here it's 5%, whether direct petitioning or the vote result after an election. The amount of days, this is huge. I mean, even getting one of these things changed will be huge. In Minnesota, you get 14 days to petition for ballot access. In Wisconsin, you get 70 days. Iowa, you get 140 days. South Dakota, you get 112 days. Here, we can't even use 8.5 by 11 paper for our petitions. I mean, there's a bunch of, without getting in the weeds on all this stuff, I really appreciate your leadership and courage to bring this forth. And I know you might not be getting a lot of great reception within your own ranks, but I don't know if you want to address that at all.
Chris, I'm going to go right back to the courage thing. I think when we start to keep moving this forward, keep advancing the dialogue, I think some of my colleagues in the Republican caucus are going to start to say, all right, we should think about this. I mean, not only did you have the people you mentioned at the press conference, but you also had the national leader of the Libertarian Party. And didn't you have some people from the university there as well?
Yep. Students for Liberty from the University of Minnesota were there as well.
So we had them there. And these folks are passionate. They're saying, we just want to make sure that there's choice. And with the choice will come the ability to choose from, if you will, a political platform that makes more sense. Because quite honestly, the Republican and the Democratic Party have been plagued with an inability to represent the lion's share of the people who go by that name. And a lot of times it's sort of a polarized kind of situation that we're faced with. So in my own caucus, I think they're going to come around, but it's hard to be courageous because they look at who are my donors, how's this going to play out with my next election. But the bottom line, I believe in my heart that a lot of my caucus colleagues do believe that if we have more people at the table, we'll have a better discussion and we'll have a better chance of having people in office that represent all of Minnesota.
Dr. Jensen, this is Zavier. I kudos you for supporting this bill that Chris put forward. And I was wondering, you had said that there are maybe not a lot, but some people in the Republican caucus there in the Senate are willing to support this. Are you allowed to say any names or of people who you think could follow suit with you, or are there any other arms that I should be pulling on or talking to help with this?
Well, it's a great question, and it's a pointed one, Xavier. And I don't think I'm going to speak out of school when I say this, but before we presented the bill, I had a couple other senators on the bill, but there was concern about one section. So over the last 3 days, Chris Holbrook, some of the folks that he interfaces with, and myself, we talked it over. I met with Senator Mary Kiffmeyer, talked to her about it, met with a couple other senators. We decided that there was one section toward the end of the bill that was maybe more distracting than anything else. It was in there because we thought that it would accomplish something that would be worthwhile. But sometimes in a bill, a piece that you think is good can just complicate it. So we made a command decision. We said, we're going to take it out. One of those senators, Senator Rich Draheim, said, I'll be back on the bill. If that section's out, I want to make sure that I'm helping do whatever we can to create a level playing field. I think Senator Draheim's initiative to get back on the bill is going to be replicated as we go through the next few weeks.
State Senator Scott Jensen on the line with us. We'll keep him on and continue our discussion in the next segment. We also have in studio Chris Holbrook, chair of the Libertarian Party of Minnesota, and Zavier Bicott, chair of the Republican Liberty Caucus. My name's Walter Hudson. Closing argument, TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com. Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130, 103.5 FM. Closing argument. My name's Walter Hudson. Streaming at TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com and your iHeartRadio app. We are here 8 to 10 weeknights. It's great having you with us. Thanks for joining. In studio, we have Chris Holbrook, chair of the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. Also, Zavier Bicott, chair of the Republican Liberty Caucus. Republicans versus Libertarians in a cage match. Starting now. Actually, there's been very little animosity so far this evening.
Still going slow.
Trust us, it's a trap. We haven't sprung it yet.
We'll build up to it. We'll have the cage match at some point down the line here. Also on the line, we have State Senator Scott Jensen joining us. Brad Omland producing the show. We'll bring the senator back on. Appreciate you being with us, Senator. We left off talking about a bill that's working its way through the legislature with your leadership to increase ballot access, to bring Minnesota in line with surrounding states when it comes to third-party ballot access. That's not the only thing you're working on, though.
No, I think before we leave that issue, if I could just make one comment, I think what people need to understand is while in Wisconsin, to get a ballot access, you might have to get 10,000 signatures and have a couple of months to do it. In Minnesota, we ask you to get 130,000 signatures, and we give you 14 days. And by the way, you better have it on the right size of paper, or the signatures don't count.
Right.
Also, you get arrested trying to collect signatures, if I remember correctly. A couple years ago, Libertarian Party.
2014, I got arrested. Thanks for bringing that up, Zavier.
Because you were out trying to collect signatures to get out of the ballot. Yeah. And the police were there arresting them, saying you're not allowed to be. What was they accusing you of? Handing out pamphlets?
Like selling in the park without a permit. I wasn't selling anything. This was at Lake Calhoun. Yeah, I got arrested.
You got arrested.
Up against a car, thrown in the back for.
I think I remember that story.
For collecting signatures to be a part of the electoral process. So bad.
Wow.
As inclusive and liberal and progressive as Minnesota thinks it is, it's really restrictive on some things like this.
Yeah.
And I know we want to transition. I would just add one more sentence.
And I cut off Dr. Jensen. I apologize.
God, you're so rude.
Fine. I finished my thought.
Okay. But like I was telling Zavier at the break, I mean, the whole point of this isn't to give other parties necessarily any power or money or debate stage. It's so that, like Zavier said earlier in the program, let's discuss the ideas. We want a platform to share ideas because some of the main two-party systemic problems are obviously not working. It's not necessarily what everyone wants. I mean, Gallup polls right now show that 57% of people want a third party. They want more options. So we just want a chance to share those, and people don't vote for them, fine. But yeah, let's transition into your marijuana legislation. Excuse me. I did want to say one note. There's a marijuana lobby day tomorrow at the Capitol. Are you part of that, Senator, or do you have any information on the marijuana legalization status?
In terms of the marijuana lobby tomorrow, nobody's contacted me directly. I thought I'd certainly stop by. But in terms of the context of the bill that I signed on as a co-author with Senator Melissa Franzen being the lead author, when she first approached me and asked me if I would participate, she had no idea that for the last 4 months, I've been really trying to go as deep into the weeds, unintended, deep into the weeds as I could to try to, really have a broad base of understanding. Because I've had a lot of folks, both patients of mine who are using medical marijuana, patients that would like to maybe try it, and then a lot of constituents talk to me and say, well, what do you think? And it wasn't something that I was really, if you would, geared toward doing. But honestly, I have to ask myself the question, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? Frankly, we have a perfect storm hitting us. We have medical marijuana having an expanded list of diagnoses that make patients eligible. We now can use medical marijuana for glaucoma, refractory muscle spasms, dementia, obstructive sleep apnea. Who doesn't have obstructive sleep apnea these days? You put that on
It depends on the strand, Dr. Jensen.
Yeah, but you put that on top of the CBD products that are in the pharmacy and the grocery store shelves. Then you see Michigan passing, total recreational marijuana. And then you have the federal government saying, we're going to approve hemp as a product once again after 50 years of it being an unlawful product. And then you see two political groups gain major party status in the November election, both on the strength of, legalizing cannabis. If this isn't a message to legislators
Right.
to be courageous, to step back and say, we need to have a bold, robust discussion. How do we do this? How do we address those critical issues of gateway access to young people or impaired driving or public safety?
Or as an alternative to opioids. I mean, one of the big objections, thank you, Dr. Jensen, that, the Republican Liberty Caucus is pushing for recreational marijuana. I know there's about 3 bills probably going to be coming. There's 3 bills out there right now. I wanted to ask you, and maybe you're unaware of them, what made you choose this bill instead of some of the others? Because I've been looking at some of the others, and I'm part of a bigger coalition where this one may not be like the most pro-pot bill. But is there any reason why you did pick this one, or you just haven't seen other ones yet? Maybe you can discuss that a little bit.
Great question. And my style is to be pretty blunt. So I'll just tell you, nobody else approached me.
Well, I'll make sure they approach you this week.
So Senator Melissa Franzen and Senator Ann Rest came and said, would you sign on? And I said, well, let me read the bill. And I looked at it. There were some pretty good-sized gaps in it. There's not enough attention paid towards how would we address impaired driving? How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to deal with gateway access? But some of the questions that we're asking are already in play, but people don't realize it. We've got people that are going to work, and they're very good employees. And fact of the matter is, if their urine was tested, it would be positive for THC, because 2 weekends ago, they might have smoked a joint. Well, these are very good employees, and the employers, it's sort of almost one of don't ask, don't tell. They don't want to know about this, but as this issue emerges more and more, we're going to have to address these kinds of issues. So when Franzen asked me, would you be willing to sign on to help me get an informational hearing? I said, well, what's your goal? And she said, well, I'm not looking to get this bill passed this year. I just think we need to have the discussion. Quite frankly, the idea of having a constitutional amendment, which is one of the bills coming out of the House in 2020, the constitutional amendment, I don't think we're ready for that. I think we need to be able to say, we're going to press pause. We're going to do some deep research. We're not going to create winners and losers on this issue. We're all going to try to get on the same page and say, what are the problems? What are the advantages? Why would we not have this kind of discussion? And that's why I signed on to that bill.
I was listening to some of the reasons why Majority Leader Gazelko is saying, well, this isn't a top priority. We're not going to discuss this as an issue moving forward this session. And then they go ahead and, decide to say we want to have the Labrador be our state's dog. Like, that's more important than something like the recreational marijuana issue. That was kind of frustrating for me, hearing that as a reason for not discussing this issue, which is sweeping across the country, not only something that's popping up when you have a minor party getting, a new minor party status, which beat the Libertarian Party in a statewide race that just has legalized cannabis now. Like, to me, it's obviously an issue that people care about right now. I was curious the feedback you're getting in your district. When I look at the electoral map as a suburban district, kind of Eden Prairie area that you represent, what are you getting from like a suburban district on recreational marijuana? Because I think maybe some Republicans may be concerned about their constituents maybe not supporting this, and I was wondering more about what you're hearing in your suburban type area.
Good question. I'm certainly getting some flack about being, quote, the pot doc. I get that. But when I've told people that this is a perfect storm and we can't afford to get behind on this issue, we got to be out in front of it. We need to be talking about when you make things illegal, oftentimes you actually cause people to utilize it more. We have legal tobacco, but is anybody saying it's good for you? We have legal alcohol, but are we saying it's good for you? If we end up having adult use cannabis available, we're not saying it's good for you. We're not telling young people to do it. We're saying, listen, we're going to make decisions. And the fact of the matter is, there are some studies that indicate 25% of the people that are chronically addicted to opiates can get off with a small amount of THC. Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing from my district is, I'm getting some people that are surprised at me and they're frustrated. But I would say that 80%, and in fact, I had a town hall meeting about 2 weeks ago, and I asked for a show of hands. We had 150 people there. So I said, who in this room would support the idea of having a robust, deep discussion about what we should do about legalizing marijuana and how we should deal with it as a society? And we had everybody raise their hand pretty much except for about a half dozen people. So we had 90 to 95% of people say, it's time to have that discussion. We cannot avoid it any longer.
I think that's good. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I was just going to say exactly that. I mean, whether it's reforming our archaic ballot access barriers or addressing the elephant in the room of marijuana, I don't see why we wouldn't be willing to have discussions on those things and committee hearings. The last thing I would say, anyone listening, just please contact your representatives and ask them to have these discussions and bring these bills into committee hearings so that we can.
And Chris, if I could just add one thing onto that, I apologize for interrupting, but I think one of the problems is people are sort of stuck in a mindset when they think of marijuana. Maybe they think of Woodstock in the 60s or something, but I think we should look at it more like fireworks, because in Minnesota, we're not actually allowed to have fireworks that detonate in the air. So bottle rockets and firecrackers are not legal. But whenever we talk about that, we always talk about use, possession, and sales. And if we do the same thing with marijuana, do we want to equate, someone using a smidgen of marijuana in their home in a private setting and say that that should be something for which they're criminalized, knowing that law really isn't going to be enforced equally, that it's going to adversely affect minority communities of color? And then if we want to step it up, go to the next one. Don't talk about use, talk about possession. Is having a half an ounce of marijuana as big a crime as having a barrel full of it? And then go to the next step, sales. If we don't want to sell it, if we don't want to commercialize it, fine. But let's realize when we don't, that we're artificially propping the cost of marijuana for those people who are using it medically. It's 3 times the cost that it would have to be.
State Senator Scott Jensen joining us on the line. Appreciate you giving us your time tonight, and very much appreciate you being willing to go out on a limb and do something that is on the cutting edge of where Republicans and conservatives and libertarians ought to be in this state, and I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Take care. Closing argument. My name's Walter Hudson. We'll be back with our final segment of the evening. TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com.